All right. So I'm gonna just explain a little bit about my setup while we're waiting for the last couple people to come in if people are running a little bit late. Um, First of all, I'll just introduce myself. My name's Kevin Holderny. I am Hulk's Workshop. Um, if you're not familiar with my name, that's totally understandable. I'm not like a major painter person or anything like that, and I haven't really been that active for the last couple months. Um, this last year's been kind of trying for us, and we've just been doing what we can to get through. So, I haven't been that motivated to sit down and actually do some paint projects. But I taught this class last September at ReaperCon last year. And it went really well, and I got really excited about it, and everybody seemed to have a really good time. And I'll put some of the pictures from. I mean, if you've seen the Discord for my Discord channel, you can see if some people have posted some of the stuff they did last year, and it's really awesome. Um, People doing things with this that just blow me away. And that's one of the things that I want to stress about this is that this is really just a guideline. Pretty much every single step along the way here can be modified and altered and tweaked and experimented with. And that's my favorite thing about painting. My favorite thing is like finding something that works and then saying, oh, I wonder if I do it this way, and then trying and accidentally stumbling across some crazy technique or, something that's not traditional that gives you an effect that you've never seen before or makes something easier or more fun. So that's really what I want everybody to get out of this is like, these are just some steps that you can take to do this, but please change it, alter it, and do something different. So last year, whenever I did this class, I told people, just if you prime your model, prime it. If you don't prime it. It doesn't matter. And the first step we did in class was base coat. This year, I did mark down to base coat beforehand, but I understand if some of you didn't know that and didn't do it. So while we're going over this stuff, if you want to base coat your cloak, if you haven't already, in Nightmare Black, go ahead and do that. I recommend, two thin coats at least. Nightmare Black is a little bit of a transparent color, which is going to come in handy later. So just make sure you get a solid coat on there, a solid color. Also, you don't have to use Nightmare Black. I recommend either a dark black or a dark blue or a dark purple color for your base color, because it's going to serve as like the empty space. So Nightmare Black's just the one that I chose because I like the transparency of it for a step that comes later. So you could go ahead and do that. Yeah, Ruth, I see you said coal black. Coal black is actually the color that I used the first time that I did this, and it looks really good. So you can definitely use coal black and it's going to look good. Payne's gray. Yeah, I actually just got some Payne gray ink. I'm excited to use. So yeah, any dark blue, dark purple. In fact, I think there was a dark purple in the ReaperCon colors last year. Kraken ink might be a good one for that too. That would be cool. So go ahead and base coat if you haven't already, and let's talk about the paint mixes here. So I have my colors laid out here on my wet palette. If you don't have a wet palette, that's fine too. You'll probably just need to thin your paint a little bit more than I do. So I do about, this is totally variable for everybody, but I do about 5 or 6 drops of paint. And I don't know if you can see, I have a decent sized drop of water right there next to each one. So those are the clears: clear blue, clear purple, clear magenta, and then I have my dragon white there. And then that is my Nightmare Black at the bottom. So for the Nightmare Black we're going to use later, I use 2 drops of water because we want that a little bit more thin. But for the clears, you can do 1 decent sized drop to about 5 or 6 drops. So you want it a little bit thin and runny, but not too much so that it's like a wash. So somewhere in between a glaze and a wash. Same for the white, but the white doesn't matter as much. It's okay if it's a little bit thicker. You'll see why whenever we get to that part. And the Nightmare Black we're going to use as a glaze. So we want it a little bit more thin, but because it's already a pretty transparent color, you don't have to go too crazy with it.
We had a question about if we don't have magenta, could we mix red and blue together?
You can do, I mean, you could use whichever colors you want. The reason that I picked these three is because they're all in the clear set and they all kind of blend well together. You could use a red with a little bit of blue in it. That would work. I've seen people use greens and yellows and stuff because of the way space scenes work. You know, I mean, in real life, those colors aren't technically real anyway. A lot of what we see when we look at the photos of those starscapes, the colors are artificial. So whatever you want to use is going to work fine. The main thing is going to be the blending and the layering steps, and the color, like the colors you can experiment with along the way. So yeah, you can use a red with a bit of, or yeah, a red with a bit of blue in it. That would be fine. The more transparent, the better. So I wouldn't use something that's super opaque. You're going to have a little bit of a difficult time getting the blends to come through later whenever we do that. But yeah, don't be afraid to try different stuff. Okay, so let's go to the, I guess I should describe my brushes here first too. So I'm going to be using 3 brushes here. The first one is just a brush for layering, just for normal painting. We'll be using that to glaze the shadows in later. It's just a regular brush. You can use an artificial one, a natural one. It doesn't make a difference for this. And then the other brushes that I have, this is a stippling brush. I bought this from, I think, Michael's for like 50 or 60 cents. It's a Royal and Langnickel, really, really thin, really short, sorry, not thin, really short bristles and stiff. If you don't have one of these, you can just take a cheap craft brush. This is an Artist's Loft number 4, and I just snipped the top off. So I just cut the top part off. So it looked kind of like that in the beginning. And then I just cut the bristles down to leave about like between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch left on there. So you want them to be stiff like that. And either way, if you have one of these, it's going to serve the same purpose later. So we're going to start with our stippling brush. And we're going to start with the clears. So the first thing we want to do is, this is our blank sky right here. So we want to come up with a direction for the main nebula of the galaxy. So if you've seen galaxy paints before, they're not all the same, but there's a common thing to them, and some of them have those big nebulas that go through. So we want to pick a direction for that. So in the example that I've done historically, I've gone like up this way. So we're going to just do that again. So I'm going to start in the bottom left and go up to the top right. And it's just a rough layout. So I've got this towel here. You can use a paper towel to dab your paint, but if you do that with a stippling brush, you might get fibers of the paper from the paper towel in the bristle. So for this type of thing, I tend to use a cloth. If you have a paper towel, that's fine. Just make sure you check it so that you're not taking paper fibers and putting it onto your model and having, I mean, that might be cool, I don't know, but for this, we're just keep an eye out for it. So what I'm going to do is just go take some of the paint, the clear paint, onto my brush, and then just dab a bit of it off onto the towel, because we want some on there, but we don't want it to pool and run. And then I'm going to go from the bottom left and just roughly make a line. So just dabbing it and brushing it and pushing the paint around and bringing it from the bottom left to the top right, just in a rough line there. And then you can go and take some of your magenta, do the same thing, dab a little bit of it off, go to like the top side of the blue that you already have. I'm trying to get it, you can see that on there. So what you'll see is whenever you do that, you'll start to blend naturally. It's like wet blending clears. And you can go quickly, and it doesn't have to be super smooth, because honestly, this first step, you're not going to see a lot of it. It's when it dries, it's going to be kind of invisible. But what you want to do is sort of lay a little bit of color variation out for the background. And you can even come up here in this empty section up here and just put a little bit up there too. And then we'll go back to the blue. put a little bit down here. So we're just laying out this line like this. So if you can see that, I've got two sort of rough lines going from up here, and then I've got a little one right there. Sorry, it's a little bit out of focus.
You had a question. Someone was asking what color did you paint the cloak first?
The cloak was Nightmare Black, which is number 09280. But like I said earlier, you don't have to do that. Just any dark blue, any dark purple, a night sky color would be fine. And I know some people are doing this technique on something different other than a cloak. I've seen some people doing, somebody was doing the mechanical dragon, which is pretty awesome. But the same principle applies. You just want to, if you have like a dragon wing, like say this is my dragon wing, you want to picture the direction that you want the nebula, the galaxy to go, and then sort of make a rough outline of that with your clear colors just to lay down a base coat. And because they're a little thin, they'll take a little bit longer to dry, but you can, once you have that down, you can set that aside. Jason did it on wings. Yeah, there's some awesome stuff. I mean, I've seen the worm gear, some other dragons. Somebody did it on I think a space marine armor, which was pretty awesome. So you can go ahead and clean your brush off after you do that first part. The second thing we're going to be doing is very similar, but it's going to lay out the more solid center line of our nebula. So this is going to be the basis of everything, and we're going to do that in, I picked dragon white, any white, pure white, because we're going to be covering most of it up. You can, depending on the feel you're going for your whole piece, you can use anything though. If you don't want to go all the way up to a pure white, use a linen white or something a little more tinted rather than just a stark pure white. But for the purposes of this, I'm just going to do dragon white just to show you how it works. Does anybody have any questions so far? I don't see a lot in the chat, but if anybody has anything that they want to know, feel free to throw questions out. Yeah, that's getting pretty dry. And like I said, you can see when it dries, you can barely tell that there's anything even there, but it will make a little bit of a difference because it's going to smooth the transitions later. Okay. So that's pretty dry. Let's jump down to the next step here. So we're going to take a little bit of the white, in the same way that we did with the clears, we're going to take some off, and you can take more off for the white because you really don't want this to pool and run. So I'll put a couple. Yeah, that's what we want it to look like. So that's kind of what you want it to look like, sort of little bursts like that. And then just make them go in the direction that you want your nebula to go. And the good thing about having a textured thing, like a textured surface, like a cloak to work on, is it will naturally create variation in the shapes because you'll be putting more paint down on the raised surfaces than on the like the crevices and the folds of the cloak, which is going to be good for later. And then I'll put a little bit up there as well. I'll put some down here too. So there you go. And we'll be going back and forth. So don't be afraid if you have too much, you don't. If you think you don't have enough, you can add a little bit more, but don't worry about having too much because we'll be blending them down. Yeah, it is bright, I know. And it can be a little bit scary because you put it down and think, oh, I put too much down. But we're gonna go back and forth between those clears and the white, and it will dull those colors. Yeah, I did dilute the white a little bit just with 1 drop of water like I did with the clears. Mallory, the colors, I alternated between the clear blue, clear purple, and clear magenta, and just went back and forth and sort of roughly wet blended them in a line, and then a little bit up there as well. So yeah, now you can really see the line of the galaxy starting to come together, and the white will dry faster. I don't know why that is, probably because thicker pigments or something. But once that's dry, we're just going to start going back and forth and doing similar things that we did already. So I know you're probably not caught up yet, but if you aren't, you can it's going to take a little while for the next part to dry. So we're just going to go back to the clears and just do the same thing that we did. So like I have some clear blue here, take a little bit off, and then I go, let's say we'll do the bottom with clear blue. So I go along the bottom of the white that I just put down, just blend it in a little bit. Do some over here, up here. So now you have a contrast between that pure white and the dark of the empty cloak, the nightmare black there. And then same thing, you just grab some purple, dab some off, blend that together too. We'll take the purple in the middle. So just above the blue, we'll go with clear purple. And this is all subject to your own interpretation. So you don't have to stick with the colors that I have. You don't have to stick with the order that I have. And then we'll take this clear magenta. We'll put that on the top. Clear magenta is a lot thinner. At least I don't know if it's just mine or if it's just the way the color works in general, but the clear magenta seems to be a lot more transparent than the others. So there's a first pass, and you can see it adds a lot of interest whenever they start blending together. And also you can see Martin, now that it's covered, it's definitely not as bright anymore, which is a good thing, because we want to basically, we're going back and forth between the clears and the white to bring the blends up to a nice, you don't want it to be too smooth because we're not looking for like, a shadow blend or anything like that, but smooth enough to create the illusion that you're looking at a nebula far away in space. So everybody good so far? Does anybody have any questions or anything? If you have pooling in the creases, you can take your regular brush and just, like, if you've ever used the wash before and you take the excess, you can just take some of that excess off with the brush. Because the clears are very transparent and it's over a black background, you're not going to notice it as much as you would as, say, like a wash pooling and drying over a light color, but you don't want too much. You don't want to wash out. So if you have like deep pools on there, just take your regular brush and just like suck them up with that. Okay, so now that we've got that second layer down, we're just going to go back to the white, just like we did before. Take some of it off onto our towel and stay toward the middle this time. So instead of going all the way outside like we did before, stay toward the center and just a little bit more. And if you want to throw, like, let's say we throw some down here, just a little bit there and some there. So now we've got that stark white again in there. And then go back to the clears. So you can see we're just kind of working everything Actually going to thin my blue down just a little bit more. Little fuzz on there. Go.
We had a couple questions.
Go for it.
Should all the white be covered at this point?
You can leave a bit of white at the center to, if you want, to make that section pop out a little bit more. Like if you have an area that you want to make, basically the more white there is, the closer it looks to you. So if you have all of this all covered and then a bit of white exposed in the middle, it will look like the center part where you left the white there is closer to you in space than the rest of it. So you don't have to cover it all. If you leave some exposed, it'll just change the way that it looks, which is a good thing.
And then would using a pearl white or a glossy white be beneficial to pop through the clear layers?
Do you mean like a metallic color, like something with a mica flake in it or something like that?
I think pearl white is a pearlescent and glossy white is just a glossy white.
So I don't know. I've never done either of those before. I don't personally use that much metallic paint, pearl or pearlescent paint or anything with like a medium in it like that. It's worth trying though. It might look awesome. Glossy, I don't know. The only reason that I'm not sure about glossy is because the properties of the physical properties of the paint itself might make layering on top of it a little more difficult. I'm not sure, because I know that if you have a gloss, like a glossy paint down and then put a thin paint on top of it, it tends to pool a little bit differently than if you have a matte color. Worth trying though. If you try it out and it looks awesome, or if you try it out and it doesn't look awesome, let me know. Share your results with me. I'd love to see it. Okay, so I'm gonna do something a little bit crazy here, because I'm happy with the way that those blends are, but I'm not happy with how small the sections are. So you don't have to do what I'm about to do, but I'm gonna do something a little bit crazy, and I'm gonna make my nebula sections a little bit bigger. So I'm just gonna go like this, right over top of everything a little bit. Like I said, you don't have to do this. I'm just doing this because I want mine to be a little bit bigger to show up on camera a little bit better. So that was just white that I put down. And then I'm going to go back with the clears again. Okay. So once you have the big nebula laid out like this, and you're happy with the way that the blends look, you can go back and forth as much or as little as you want. For the purposes of the class, because we only have an hour here today, I'm going to finish this layer off and then move on to the next step. But feel free to work at it and get as in depth as you want with the blends. If you have a large surface, obviously this is going to take a lot longer. I know, like if you're working on worm gear and you're doing those wings, this part is going to take you a long time. So all right. So I'm just going to go with that. Maybe I'll do a little bit more purple in the middle here. There we go. Okay. So that'll be all right for this. So we'll let that dry. And I'm going to start explaining the next part. If you're behind, that's all right. You don't have to rush to catch up, but I'm just going to explain what we'll be doing next. So the next part, we're going to be flicking some paint onto our model to do like star scatter. The thing about this is it can be messy. So if you have the rest of your model painted and you're doing the cloak last, you're probably going to want to mask everything else off. So if you have some blue tack or something to cover up the areas that you've already painted so that you don't get them, white, you don't get white dots all over them. That's a good idea. For mine, I'm not really worried about it because I'm just using it for demonstration purposes. Also, if you have stuff on your work area that you don't want covered, it's a good covered with white dots, I should say. It's a good idea to put some maybe newspaper down or something. I'm not going to do that because I'm irresponsible. But yeah, that's a good idea to do too. So I'm going to clean my stippling brush off here a bit.
There's a couple more questions too.
Go for it.
Does the paint need to dry between coats?
For the layering over the nebula part that we just did, it doesn't have to be totally dry. The white, I would say yes. I would wait for the white to dry, because if your white layer isn't totally dry and you start to layer your clears on top of it, you might pull up some of that white and have some weird sort of tea staining, like almost chipped looking sections, which might add interest to it too. But if it's not something you're going for, I would wait for the white to dry. The clears, because of their transparency, you don't have to wait so much for them because they'll blend together and make things look a little bit more interesting. So yeah.
Secondly, someone asked, can I scale this process up for a large model, or does the technique change?
You can. You'll probably need to do a few extra things when we get to the speckling section, because I would say the model itself doesn't matter for the scale. It's the scale of the galaxy itself. And what I mean by that is you could have a galaxy at this scale expanded into a larger model and do the exact same thing and it would look good. But if you want to take, it's hard to explain. If you want to take this section and expand it to make it bigger, then you'll need to do some stuff differently later. I don't know if that makes sense. It makes sense in my head what I'm trying to say, but I don't know if I'm explaining it right. Basically, the difference between taking this small section and like expanding it to be bigger, or making your view of what this little scene is bigger, if that makes sense. Okay, cool. You get what I'm saying. All right, so what we're going to do, is that all the questions? Was there anything else that anybody had?
That was it for now.
Okay. All right, so what we're going to do next is we're going to speckle some stars on. So we're going to take our stippling brush, or the brush that you cut for yourself earlier. Exactly, Kevin. The stars go from dots to circles. So you'll just have to add a few more handmade ones later if you make it bigger. So for this part, we're going to take some paint on some dragon white in this case on our brush. Just take a little bit off like we did before. And then I'm going to set this down right there. And then I'm going to take my brush, and I'm not going to use my thumb. I'm going to use my pointer finger here, and I'm just going to pull back like flicking a lighter. For those of you who don't smoke, flicking a lighter, it's been a long time since I smoked, but flicking a lighter is one of those things that if you've done it before, you know what I'm talking about. So basically hold your paintbrush about 2 inches or so back from your model and flick the top of your brush like you're flicking a lighter. And you might need to add a bit more paint to this to get it to work correctly. But what it'll do is it'll flick little speckles onto your model. Let me switch over. I'll use the cut brush so that you can see an example of that too. Yeah, that's good. The cut brush actually puts a lot more up than the. So they're going to look very bright. Same as, someone mentioned before, adding the white paint to the nebula is a big jump in brightness, and it's the same here. They're going to look really bright, but don't worry, we're going to do some glazing on top of it to tone those down a little bit. So you want to get kind of a decent amount of them on there. So there's a good amount right there, and right away, I mean, you can see the change. And those dry really quickly because they're just little specks of paint. I don't know. I just got an airbrush, so I'm not as familiar. I know I've seen people do something with their airbrush where they do a similar thing. They change the pressure and spray white paint out, and it gets that speckled look. The cut brush have softer or harder bristles. The cut brush, they're a little bit softer, but the stippling brush that I bought from Michaels, they're a little bit harder. So you'll likely need to adjust the consistency of your paint depending on the type of brush that you're using. So there you go. There's that. So then once those are dry, which won't take very long, we're gonna switch over. Actually, you know what? We're not gonna do that yet. Let's stick with our stippling brush here. And we're gonna do one more pass of the clears, just like we did before. So I'm gonna go in with my stippling brush and some of those clears and just do one more, following along with what I had previously, just to blend out some of those more harsh white specks that I put down. Yeah, and you can see almost right away the ones that you cover get a little bit more dim, and that's what we want. We just want variation. You don't want them all to be the same brightness. That looks cool. And the magenta. And then if you feel like you've covered too much, if you like the way that it looked before, and then going in with your clears to cover some of the bright spots up, if you feel like you've gone too far, just go ahead and take a little bit more of your white and just add a little bit more. You know, there's nothing stopping you from going back and forth and back and forth and just working it to the place where you like the way it looks. Everybody okay with where we're at right now? I'm gonna go ahead and do a little bit more here. So really what we're doing, aside from the star speckling in there, is we're just wet blending, really. And having that white layer underneath just gives you an underpainting of value shift from the dark value of the background to the light value of the nebula itself. And then wet blending the clears over top of it just adds tone to the underpaint. And like I mentioned earlier, a lot of this stuff is, well, pretty much all of it is open to interpretation and exploration. So like I said, if you want to take, instead of blue, purple, and magenta, if you want to do green and orange, I've seen some awesome ones last time, some people who did green and orange, and they look very cool. If you want to do, instead of a directional nebula, like a curtain like that, if you wanted to do like a spiral or a circle, right, or aurora borealis effect would work really well with this. If you did like greens and yellows, like yellow green, like that curtain, that would look really awesome. All of this, it's all exploration and iteration, you know, once you know how to do it, change it up and make it your own. And share your results, please. Like I love the collaborative effort that painting is, you know, where you learn how to do something and share that knowledge, and then someone takes that and then they expand on it and then they share what they learned, and then I mean that's how we all get better as a community. All right, so we're gonna let that dry for a minute. Does anybody have any questions while we let that part dry? So before we finish, I'll say the class handout that I have for this is the same one from last year at ReaperCon. There's a section at the end where I said share your class models, and basically everybody who shares the model that they painted from the class today with me, I'm gonna at the end of tomorrow, so tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern, so in 24 and a half hours from now, I'm going to take everybody who shares their completed models with me and put everyone's name into a random drawing and pull a name, and then I'll send you some Reaper stuff. And the date's wrong on the handout because it's from last year, but I just wanted to reiterate that I'm still going to do that this time. It's just that the date's going to change. Okay, Martin, I see your question. How thick is your white paint for the flickering? So what I used here is about 4 or 5 drops of dragon white paint and 1 drop of water. So it's not quite a runny like wash consistency. It's basically just thinned down a bit. It's almost gone on my palette right now. Facebook, no, it's the Discord. You could go in my Discord artist alley page, share your work in there. That's where I'm going to be doing it this time. And a little bit more, yeah, Ruth, yes, yeah. The more you thin, the more paint is going to go onto your model, so you'll have different sizes like that. And actually, you can go in, like if I take my regular brush now and take some of that white, I can make a few bigger stars. Like let's say I want to put something like right down here, put something a little bit bigger there, you know, just to add variation there, because sometimes they can look a little bit too uniform. I mean, if we're talking about space, it's like the most random of the random. So having every dot the same color, or I'm sorry, the same size, might not be super realistic. So you can take your brush and just make a couple larger pieces. Have I tried a toothbrush for the speckles? I feel like the toothbrush might be a little bit too much for this size model anyway. If you're using a larger model, you might be able to use a toothbrush, but just thinking about having a toothbrush and pulling back on it, I can just imagine the entire model being covered. But yeah, if you're doing something like a dragon, I think that might work fine. Quasars and pulsars would be fun. Yeah, we're gonna add a little comet at the end. That's sort of the thing that I usually do towards the end here. Have you ever done stars in multiple colors like red and yellow with the white? I personally haven't. I have seen last time I taught the class, there were some people who did some variations on star colors and they turned out really well too. It's all about your personal like balance, what you're going for in the overall model. Like let's say you wanted to paint this wizard to have, I don't know, like a yellow hat, and this robe would be yellow too, then maybe you'd want to put a couple yellow stars in there just to like bring everything all together as one piece. Okay. Okay, so what we're gonna do next is we're gonna glaze some of the recesses here. So you can take your normal brush like this. Um, Connor, the first thing that I did was the Sophie, the Reaper Sophie with the wings, which I'll show at the end. And that's the one that I used coal black for the base instead of nightmare black. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna shade the recesses of the cloak now. So you could take your normal brush, and we want to go back to nightmare black again. And I mentioned at the beginning, you want this to be a little bit more thin. Nightmare black, like I said, is already pretty transparent, but instead of one drop of water here, I added two, so you can see it's a little bit more liquid, and you can test it out too. So I'm going to take a little bit on my brush there. See, that's pretty transparent, and that's what we want. That's focused. So what we want to do is take some of that nightmare black, and let's start with this fold here. So we have this fold immediately to the left of the cloak. So we just want to go in there and just shade that just a little bit. And you can take some water and blend it out some. And that's going to also add some variation to the brightness of the stars and also the brightness of the nebula that you have there. So again, you just go into this little recess here, that, and then take some water, blend it out a little bit. And honestly, nightmare black is like the perfect color for this because it's not too opaque. It doesn't completely cover up everything that you've already done, but you do get that nice variation of shades there. And under the hood too, we'll do a little bit under the hood. Don't be afraid to get in there with your finger too to wipe some of that away. So just go ahead and add the little line right here. We'll get some in there. And with this. And if you feel like your paint is too thick still, you could go ahead and add some water to it and thin it down a bit more. If you feel like you're getting too stark of a line, like I feel like this line right here is a little bit too thick, so just thin that out a little bit. Yeah, and you can see what that does is it also adds a little bit of a filter over some of those stars, the speckles that you put down, and gives them a little blue variation in tone. It's nice. Yeah, nightmare black is a really, really cool color. There. So yeah, you just go ahead and do your shadows there. The last time I did this too, I had somebody ask if you wanted to highlight the cloak, like if you wanted to highlight the cloak like a normal cloak and also do a galaxy paint on top of it, which is a really good question. Personally, I would highlight the cloak first, add the rough highlights like the raised portions, maybe make them a little bit lighter. But I feel like adding this shading step at the end gives you a little bit of that variation in and of itself. But yeah, that was a really good question from last time. I'd love to see somebody do it. No, I'm thinking about that Aurora Borealis cloak that somebody mentioned earlier. I'd love to see somebody do that. If any of you do this with an Aurora, let me know. I think I did see somebody do it last time, but it's been so long I can't remember. So that's the basic idea. And then if you, because you could go back and forth so much, if you feel like you've washed out too many of those stars that you speckled down, go back in for another pass. Take some more white on your brush, and just go back for one more pass of those stars. You can always shade again. You can always add more clears to blend things out a little bit more, because we're working in such thin layers. You don't really have to worry about having thick paint on there. I mean, we've done what, 5 or 6 layers of the blending so far, and it still looks pretty thin. Okay, so we've got about 12 minutes left. For the very end, I'm going to show you, I usually end with putting a little comet on here. Let's see if I have enough white left over here. So what I normally do is take my regular brush and put some of that dragon white on there. Let's go down here on this flat part. So let's go right here, put a little circle right there. So you could see a little circle there, and then I'll actually start from where I want the comet coming. So let's say that the comet's going this way across the cloak. So I'll come back a little bit, and then I'll just pull in the direction, make like a feathered sort of trail behind it. And it's going to look bright again, like, every other white step that we've done. It's been very bright right off the bat. But then what you can do is take some of your thinned down Nightmare Black, like we did before, and pull. I'm going to start right about here and pull back. And that'll blend some of that out. And you don't have to use the Nightmare Black if you want to. Let's say you want to add some magenta in there. Do the same thing, pull back from there, and that'll blend out that tail on that star a little bit. Add a little yellow to the comet. Yeah, sure. Like I said, this is totally, you can do what you want. If you add some yellow to that, it probably would make it pop a little bit more. If I added some yellow, what I probably would end up doing then is adding a couple of those additional stars with that similar color, the yellow white mix, just to make the whole thing, make the picture come together as a whole. So yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. The main things I wanted to get across here are the steps themselves are relatively simple. You just go back and forth and work at it until you're happy with it, and feel free to experiment. Share your work with me, please. I really want to see it. My favorite part last year of doing this was seeing all of the pictures that people were sharing with me of the work. It made me feel so good. I can take questions. We still have about 10 minutes left. If anybody has any additional questions or even suggestions, if you took this class last year, or if you've done galaxy painting before and you've tried some stuff that has been cool, let me know now. We can talk about that. I'm looking through the questions from before. I think they've all been answered. Yeah. Do you think it looked good in negative? That's a cool idea. That's a very cool idea. Yeah, I can't even begin to imagine. Like, the thing I think of is that if you've seen the Warhammer star map, I think it was from the last Warhammer 40K book. The star map in there was like reversed, like a negative image, and it looked really cool. So if you do that, share it with me. I want to see it. Go over several of the white speckles. Yeah, blend out different colors. Add some. Yeah, that's a good idea. Add some variation.
You've got some questions about the badge emote or code.
Oh, yes. I don't remember what my code is. Give me 1 second and I will let you know. It's in the Discord and I just don't have it right now because I don't know what I'm doing. Let me, can I give it out in Discord after the class? I don't want to shut my stuff down and mess my stream up. So just come into the Discord after this and I'll share the code with you. And then you can add it to your repertoire there.
One other question was, what other cosmic effects have you tried that are a little bit more advanced?
I basically moved to trying to do some more freehanding of it because the thing about the speckling thing is it does work, but it limits the control that you have over like where you want the placement of your stars. You know, when you're flicking paint, it's kind of just going where it wants to and you don't have a lot of say over it. So the next thing I would work on would be like trying to manually place a few more things. Also trying to do some, you know, someone mentioned some different types of nebulas. There's some really cool pictures out there of different structured nebulas that I would try. Yeah, so here's someone asked earlier, this was the first one that I did of Sophie's wings. And that was I spent a long time blending the nebula together on there. My Discord, my Discord is not actually the correct way of saying it. It's the Artist Alley page in the Reaper RVE Discord. So if you're in Reaper's RVE Discord group, if you go to the Artist Alley section and go down to my name, Kevin Holderny, I'll share the code there for you to have the icon, the badge, and also share your photos to take pictures of what you've done and share them there. Oh, thank you for coming. Oh yeah, inside the cloaks and robes. Somebody had a question about if they wanted to do. I saw that, but I don't remember what the exact question was. If you wanted to do you do the same effect on the inside of a cloak or robe? I haven't for the class, but you can. Like I said earlier, the thing is if you were doing it after you painted the rest of the model, just make sure you mask everything that you've already painted because you don't want white speckles all over the place.
A couple more questions.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever tried a black hole?
No, I'm not sure how I would even paint a black hole. That's a good idea.
And then have you used blending makeup sponges for this technique or only brushes?
I have makeup blending sponges that I've used for other things, but I haven't used them for this. The only reason that I haven't is because they're big. I mean, I guess you could cut down a smaller piece and use it and it would probably work pretty well. But I haven't tried it yet. Yeah, exactly. Like it's the application of relatively simple techniques. And I think honestly, that's one of the best things about taking these classes, because before you know the process, a lot of the results look so good that you're like, I don't even know how I would do that. But once you see the technique broken down into steps, that you get that aha moment where you're like, oh, I can do this. And then you just have to keep doing it and doing it. Space mechs, yeah, very cool. Yeah, all right. Well, if you guys have any more questions, come to my Artists Alley page, ask them there. Don't be shy. I'll answer everything that I can. Share your pictures of your work with me. I love to see them. I will give you the code for the badge there, like I said. And also make sure you get a picture of what you've done in class before tomorrow, before 24 hours from right now. And I'll put your name into a drawing. And if I pull your name out, I'll send you some Reaper stuff. Connor, yeah, so 24 hours from right now. So for my time, it would be 4 p.m. tomorrow, which is Eastern time. Danny, yeah, next 10 minis. Yeah, and last year there were a lot of space minis going around this time, but that's awesome. Space minis are cool. I will. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Shane. Thanks for being here. Thank you, Barry. Catherine, Rebecca. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, I really appreciate everybody coming.
Right, I'm gonna go ahead and reclaim host and then end the recording and the session. Thanks,
Sounds
everybody.
good. Thanks, everyone, for coming.